Picture the afterlife's world's most awkward listening party. Ludwig van Beethoven arrives first, scowling, hair like he lost a fight with a thundercloud, and immediately turns the volume knob to a setting that does not exist. Johannes Brahms shows up 20 minutes late because he stopped for a beer, and possibly a second beer, and is already suspicious of the whole enterprise. And Franz Liszt sweeps in last, cape somehow billowing indoors, already checking his reflection in a window to make sure his hair is doing the thing. Someone, somewhere, has handed these three dead Austro-German titans a Bluetooth speaker and a playlist labeled Music of the Future. And God help us all, because we are about to find out what happens when the 19th century meets the aux chord. Start with jazz, because it's the gentlest on-ramp, and even here the room splits immediately. Beethoven, deaf as a doorpost for the back half of his career, was a man who felt music through the floorboards and the bones of the piano. A man who once got so worked up mid-composition that he dumped an entire jug of water on his own head to cool off, allegedly right through the ceiling of the apartment below. Give him syncopation, give him a walking bass line doing something sneaky and irregular, and he does not recoil. He leans in. Because this is a guy who ended a symphony by shoving a full chorus and vocal soloists into an instrumental form nobody asked him to break. Jazz's whole personality, the idea that the written page is a suggestion and the real music happens in the gap between the notes, is basically the Eroica's entire ethos, wearing a nicer hat. Brahms, on the other hand, built his entire reputation on being the guy who followed Beethoven's homework so precisely, it took him 21 years to finish a single symphony, because he was terrified of getting compared unfavorably to the guy who dumped water on his own head. A saxophone improvising over a 12-bar blues would make Brahms visibly clench. Not because it's bad, but because nothing about it has been checked, revised, burned, and rewritten 4 times, which was basically his creative process for anything he considered worth keeping. And Liszt would just want to play it. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter the genre. The man transcribed entire symphonies for solo piano for fun. So if you put a jazz combo in front of him, he is elbowing the pianist out of the bench within 90 seconds and improvising something considerably more difficult, purely because he can. Purely because there were once women in concert halls who fought over his discarded gloves, and he has never once forgotten that feeling. Then comes metal, and this is where things get genuinely chaotic, because metal is the genre these men were basically cosplaying 150 years early without the amplifiers. Consider that Beethoven's most famous fanfare in the Fifth Symphony still gets used to open sporting events and movie trailers because 4 notes of pure aggression translate across 2 centuries without losing an ounce of menace, and that this is a man who reportedly composed with such physical intensity that he'd knock over furniture and ink pots mid-tantrum. Put him in front of a double bass drum pedal and a guitarist doing a tremolo-picked riff in a minor key, and he doesn't flinch. He starts conducting the air, badly, off-tempo, the way he apparently conducted his own premieres toward the end of his life when he genuinely could no longer hear the orchestra he was in front of. Brahms would be the one standing at the back of the room, arms crossed over that enormous beard, muttering that the chord voicings are unrefined. Right up until the breakdown hits, at which point he starts nodding despite himself, because underneath the crustiness was a man who wrote a requiem full of grief and thunder and understood exactly what it felt like to want to break something with sound. But Liszt invented the idea of screaming fans losing their minds at a piano recital, a phenomenon a critic actually nicknamed Lisztomania, complete with women reportedly fighting over broken piano strings and used gloves as souvenirs. You show this man a stage dive, a wall of Marshall amps, pyrotechnics tied to a guitar solo, and he does not see a spectacle to be tolerated. He sees the concert experience he was always trying to invent, just with better lighting technology than 1841 could offer. He'd have a signature guitar within the week and a pyrotechnics rider by the second show. Country music somehow is the one that splits them the strangest way. You'd expect the 3 sophisticated European gentlemen to sneer at a genre built on plain-spoken storytelling and a twang, But Beethoven grew up dirt poor with an abusive, alcoholic father who dragged him out of bed to perform for money. And there's a real chance a song about hard living, bad luck, and stubborn pride lands for him on a level nobody expects, because that was his entire childhood set to a fiddle instead of a piano. Brahms, meanwhile, adored folk material with an almost obsessive devotion, arranging German folk songs by the dozen because he believed the plain, unpretentious tune was where the real emotional truth of music lived. So a pedal steel-soaked ballad about heartbreak and a broken-down truck might be the most at home he feels all night, assuming someone doesn't tell him it's American.
Liszt, national showman that he was, spent years championing Hungarian folk themes in his own rhapsodies, dressed up in concert hall finery, so he'd absolutely respect the impulse, while also immediately trying to add 4 more key changes and a cadenza to the bridge. And then, finally, rap. The one that would genuinely break the room in the most delightful way. Because these are, again, 3 men whose entire brand was virtuosity, technical density, and showing off in front of a crowd. Feed Beethoven a verse full of internal rhyme and stacked syllables landing on the beat with mathematical precision, and you have just described counterpoint to a man who wrote fugues for fun in his old age when he'd supposedly mellowed. Brahms would grumble about the lack of a proper harmonic structure underneath it, right before quietly admiring the density of the wordplay the way he admired a tightly constructed motif, because complexity disguised as simplicity was basically his whole late style.
And Liszt, the original showboat, the man who literally turned the piano sideways on stage so audiences could watch his hands and his profile at the same time, because he understood spectacle was half the art, would hear a freestyle and recognize it instantly as a cousin of the improvised cadenza, the moment in a concerto where the rulebook closes and the performer just goes. And he would try to battle rap the guy, badly, in German, and lose spectacularly, and somehow still leave with everyone's phone number. So there they are, 3 of the most important composers who ever lived, standing around a Bluetooth speaker in the afterlife, and Beethoven is banging his fist to a trap hi-hat pattern he can't hear, and Brahms is stroking his beard, pretending he isn't into any of it while humming the bass line of a Cardi B song under his breath, and Liszt has already asked to borrow the aux cord, the stage, and possibly your girlfriend. Turns out the future of music didn't scare them nearly as much as we assumed. They basically already lived there. They were just waiting on the amplifiers.